Reclaim Brixton is a project that responds to government planning of urban spaces in relation to gentrification, acculturation, and marginalised communities. The project responds through architectural interventions, disrupting and reclaiming gentrified developments in Brixton and reappropriating them for the marginalised Afro-Caribbean community. The project begins with a photograph taken by Tony Linked of building materials at a construction site at Levittown, New York. Levittowns were named after Levitt and Sons, who were a development company building thousands of Levitt houses in the US over 20 years. Levittowns were the epitome of suburban living in the 1950s, marketed towards white middle-class veteran families who migrated from the cities to the countryside, seeking to achieve the American dream, which was at the time heavily promoted as home and car ownership. However, Levittown's suburban living and American dream became a false reality like a film set and an unattainable dream for many. It also highlighted underlying issues with the housing system, such as the intentional exclusion of African Americans and Jews from Levittown development. The critique of the American dream begins to reveal the multiple layers of capitalism, power, and systems on various scales which control access to housing across different groups of people in America. While Levitt and Sons built white middle-class estates, the New York Housing Association built projects for poor black communities, such as the Harlem River houses. Black communities migrated from the South to escape the lynching violence and to seek better jobs and education, which was their version of the American dream. However, the conditions of housing provided by the state compared to housing provided by the developers revealed inequality and oppression between these communities. White middle-class families benefited from home ownership at the expense of black and minority communities who had to settle for rented accommodation, which was usually poor in quality and maintenance. The unfortunate foundation of racism in America infected all areas of black people's livelihood, causing many of them and other minorities to be marginalised in society, making it incredibly difficult for them to break out of poverty. This was also a similar case in the UK. From the 1950s, there was a mass migration of African Caribbeans who settled in decayed inner city areas in the UK. Similar to Levitt and Sons, white vendors did not want to rent their property to black migrants, causing them to continue to migrate across cities, trying their best to find their feet. This timeline illustrates the migration journey from Alex and Sharon Fening as they migrated from Ghana to work and live in the UK. Observation shows that individuals' domestic practices, behaviours and traditions are strongly influenced by culture. This influence is more complex when one's culture is different from the culture of residents, such as a migrant. As a result, varying levels of acculturation occurs. Berry defines acculturation as groups of individuals having different cultures come into continuous first-hand contact, causing changes in the original culture patterns of either or both groups. Berry proposes 4 possible strategies and outcomes of individual and group acculturation. For example, assimilation is where individuals adopt the practices and outlook of the dominant culture and give up their culture of origin. Forms of life have been imposed on migrants as they are expected to conform to the customs of their new country they now reside in. Conforming includes socially, politically, individually, and even domestically. A comparative analysis of 3 different households show multiple aspects of a Ghanaian family merging their customs in a British context. This can be seen as a combination of integrating Ghanaian and British culture and or assimilation of Ghanaian culture. Assimilation of migrants can be oppressive as it causes migrants to lose their identity, traditions and culture in order to be replicas of the majority group. Central Brixton is the site for this project as the area has been under heavy development for the past decade. To demonstrate Berry's society acculturation model, case studies of 4 locations in Brixton is used to explain multiculturalism, segregation, melting pot and exclusion. For instance, Pop Brixton is an example of the melting pot on a society scale. The site features repurposed shipping containers for independent retailers and enterprises. Many people believe that Pop Brixton is a prime example of gentrification. As a result, many of the black community in Brixton do not attend or use its facilities due to its unauthentic appropriation of multiculturalism, extortionate prices, and not being the developer's target market. Consequently, gentrification results to urban assimilation as working class communities are pushed out along with their cultural customs while luxury developments take over. This project disrupts the development model with positive discrimination through reclaiming these planned gentrified sites. How can architectural interventions disrupt current gentrified models of development to protect, enhance and empower black migrants and diasporas to prevent the erasure of Afro-Caribbean culture, using Brixton as a catalyst of social reform? Reclaim Brixton was a political movement which began in 2015 in response to the gentrification rapidly occurring in the district. The movement was led by local activists and supported by hundreds of Brixton residents. The protesters blamed Lambeth Council for their decisions to sell public land to the private developers. The urban strategy for this project is to reclaim the sites of 5 gentrified developments in Brixton at a specific disruption point in 2018, where construction of the interventions begin and is completed after a few years. The first site takes over the planned development of BRX, reappropriating it to a black hair hub, including live-work hairdressing units, YouTube studios, barbershops, aloe vera greenhouses, Afro hair retail stores, and conference spaces. Due to their proximity, the second site disrupts 3 adjacent gentrified sites, including Brixton Arches, Port Brixton, and Brixton Central Development. The land adjacent to the arches is reclaimed for the use of a public square, creating a central space suitable for outdoor cultural programs, whereas the arches are refurbished for existing local small businesses. The third site takes over the planned development of Ivor House and partially demolishes the building to create a black music and broadcasting hub, including radio stations, podcast studios, music recording and production suites, and a music hall. The black brick facade of the built reclaimed interventions visually unites the sites while also referring to the black Afro-Caribbean community it serves. Due to the disruption point of this site, the architectural intervention maintains most of the general arrangement of the developer proposed blocks and cores, apart from the 20-story proposed tower block and additional volumes, while everything in between has been redesigned to accommodate the Afro hair-related programs. Afro-Caribbean hairdressing is often activated through domestic spaces due to convenience, comfort, and self-employment, since Afro hairstyles can take many hours to complete. While the units are occupied, the living room offers flexibility to easily adapt between a domestic setting to a hairdressing setting, merging the divisions between the two while domestic activities still occur. The live-work hairdressing units are accessible through the courtyard for customers and include all the necessary facilities and infrastructure to accommodate the black hairdressing process and experience. This includes a shampoo room, WC, and proximity to the kitchen dining area, while including bedrooms and bathrooms above. The interior environmental conditions are enhanced by the orientation and program allocation of the blocks to maximise the natural sunlight available to aid the hairdressing process. Due to the amount of waste that is produced from used human and synthetic hair extensions, used hair has been recycled from black consumers and casted into translucent resin to create sunlight diffusing panels to prevent glare to the users when the sun is low in the sky. The application of Afro hair into the fabric of the building symbolises black cultural identity in the architecture itself, as well as the programmatic intervention. YouTube has helped to redistribute the mass media's power of television through providing a global platform for the black diaspora to discuss black cultural and identity politics. Black bloggers share cultural experiences as well as providing tutorials, product reviews, and commentary, forming a global network of black culture from their private spaces. Video recording studios are built and included, featuring the necessary infrastructure for these activities to take place. This domestic setting is not a set, but a reflection of the reality of how black hair is managed, transformed, and maintained. The architectural intervention of the Black Music and Broadcasting Hub commenced with the demolition of half of the building and the top 2 floors, partially retaining half of the building's facade, structural columns, floors, and core. The demolition of half of the building reflects the radical reversal of urban assimilation which reclaimed Brixton embodies, while the partially retained facade echoes the former development which would have been completed at the expense of black communities that now populate the site. This hub sits on Brixton's influential civic quarter, with Brixton's town hall directly next to it. The location of this intervention is significant, as inside these iconic buildings is where the district makes decisions on policies, planning, and how Brixton is developed. By reclaiming part of this site, ultimately disrupts the social, political, and economic systems that work against the minorities and instead empowers them through the protection and the support of their culture through music. Afro-Caribbean music is a major contributing factor to the retention and appreciation of black culture across generations. Recording studios feature in the hub for the recording and distribution of black music worldwide through the creation of physical and online platforms for upcoming artists. Double heights and thick wall build-up soundproofs and enhances the acoustic qualities for audio recording, replacing the 2 stories which were demolished. The studios are also aesthetically bold for visuals to be recorded and backgrounds to be digitally altered. The structure of the ground, first and second floor is maintained and is a product of the existing architecture and reappropriated as part of the urban strategy. The black diaspora has also utilised audio and video podcasts for having relevant political, cultural and light-hearted discussions about their past, present and future. Therefore, the podcast studios reappropriates the existing architecture of the building as domestic living room studios to facilitate the candidness of those important topics to record and distribute online. The third site, the reclaimed public square, creates a central space within the busiest part of Brixton, suitable for outdoor cultural programs such as Brixton Splash, a popular annual street party celebrating Afro-Caribbean culture which has been cancelled since 2016. Many locals believe that this was an act of social cleansing. The square allows the flexibility and adaptation of weekly events, organically integrating all the communities in Brixton. The design of the planned refurbishment of the arches is maintained but reclaimed back to the previous local small businesses which Network Rail previously evicted. Reflecting back to the starting image, the powers and system behind the scenes of the American dream served white and middle-class members of society, excluding minorities. The methodology of the Reclaim Brixton project is apparently the disruption of the planned and existing architecture and the reappropriated programmatic interventions. The strategic adaptation of the developer plan schemes and existing buildings proposes a replicable method of how councils could work together with developers and communities instead of a one-sided top-down approach, which is often detrimental to minority groups.